Show 11.
This Otaku's Life.
I still consider myself to be a young guy. I've worked in IT for, about 16 years. And I worked for some big companies and even some small ones. And I worked for this one company that had, at the time, about 40,000 people worldwide. It was a big and exciting environment. And I remember the first staff meeting that I had was a virtual one. The place where I worked was the headquarters. And they also had an internal television studio. And the first time we had a staff meeting, it was virtual. We all went down to the cafeteria and we watched the TVs, and they had sort of a call-in show for the staff meeting. And it was different, and it was really freaking cool. And for me, this wasn't the first company I worked at, but this certainly was the first taste of corporate life. It was a big environment, and I was working for a big company, and they did big things. Of course, there's a lot of interesting things that come along with that. I remember when I started, there was an open cube on the other side of where I sat. And at the time, there were a handful of relic computers that were sitting there. They sort of used it, in air quotes, a makeshift lab. I found out later that our bosses really wanted to make sure that they had ownership over that cube. An employee used to work there and then didn't anymore. And so we would fill this cube up with all these relic PC systems. Occasionally a handful of us would sit and hang out in there. And really what they wanted to establish is some kind of presence that it was being utilized by our department. Well, at the time, the comic Dilbert was starting to be animated. And I remember there was an episode where Dilbert had an open cube on the other side of him, and it was filled with all kinds of unwanted junk that people discarded. But Dilbert really loved the fact that this cube was filled with this junk because he didn't have any quirky individual sitting next to him. And the same went for his coworkers. They loved the fact that they had this open cube, and they didn't like the idea that it was at risk, that it would go away. So Dilbert and his coworkers created this fictitious employee named Bob. Once the word got out about how amazing Bob was, everyone had to meet him. Of course, he was never in his cube, and it looked like he was a busy guy. And the funny part was that he started to win awards and get the big deals and got promotions. And so this doesn't seem like, on the surface, it's a really funny idea. But when you work in big corporate life, there's a lot of little funny, unusual decisions that get made that always find themselves in a Dilbert comic. And this was my first taste of what I consider to be the Dilbert effect. Thank you everyone for joining us this week and continuing to listen and download. You guys are awesome. We're still trying to figure out what we're doing around here, what kind of message we want to share, what kind of things we want to talk about, and we certainly don't want to come off patronizing, but we have ideas and things we want to talk about, and hopefully you identify and maybe connect with something we've said. Of course, you can always email us at thisotakuslife@gmail.com. And you can send us feedback if you have audio. We love to read your words, but we would rather hear your voice. And so if you're able to record audio, we would love for you to send it to us. Also, at the beginning of every show, we have different voices in the introduction. We would love to have one of your voices in one of those random openings. And it's easy. All you need to do is send us some audio and say, "This Otaku's Life," with pauses in between. And while we're still on the topic of contribution, and if you're still able to record some audio, we would love to hear you share one of your stories, one of your reflections, something we've already covered here. Or maybe a new topic, a new idea that you could suggest, or something you like to hear our perspective on. Once again, I want to thank a lot of you who are contributing. People are sending in audio, and we're working out the kinks. And eventually you'll hear some of those in the near future. So thanks again, everyone, for listening, hearing us rant, share our stories, and hopefully you find something of value in something we've already shared. So until next time, everyone, have a good one.